with
That is
technology.
true.
Yeah,
But it will always outpace you. I mean,
it'll always,
the
always,
way-
always. Yeah, no matter
absolutely.
what you do. Yeah. So I think Nistush has started recording, right?
Yes, we are good to go.
Okay.
Just one announcement before that for everyone. Kindly keep yourself on mute and keep your video cameras off. There is chat box if you need to put any questions. But please keep yourself on mute and keep the videos off. Thank you. Over to you, Ravi sir.
Yeah, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. So how's your day today? I hope it's very good. This session is going to be excellent, and it's going to be full of a lot of information and deep insight on how technology, is impacting our supply chain management. And I'm sure some of you are into tech space also, apart from supply chain, and some of you are in pure supply chains, but it will benefit everyone. Okay. So this is welcome to the third episode of SCM Talk Show, season 4. So we are running season 4 now. Earlier we had 3 seasons earlier, and this is the third episode of season 4. The last episode was on the adoption of supply chain analytics, right? And this episode is on supply chain, all roads lead to technology. Very, very hot topic. We choose topics from your responses, from your feedback, and also availability of good speakers. So one of our challenges is to find speakers like Budeep. It's very difficult to get him. So whatever Nistush announced, as usual, this session will also be recorded and made available for free on KnoWerX mobile app as well as on YouTube channel. And as he announced, please keep yourself in listen only mode, and please don't start the videos, that is distracting. And if you have any questions, you can always use the chat box and you can submit your question. So depending on the availability of the time at the end, we will take up your questions. We'll try to close on the dot at 5 o'clock, but if not, we can take questions. So that's not a problem. So it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Mr. Budeep Hathi. He's the Managing Director and Lead Supply Chain and Operations Accenture's Advanced Technology Centers in India. In addition to leading supply chain technology India portfolio, Budeep also champions the natural resources industry for Accenture as the technology lead globally. He is responsible for driving large-scale technology enabled supply chain transformations for global clients, and scale future talent capital in area of sourcing, planning, and fulfillment via connected supply chain solutions. So I think you should ask him a lot of questions about the skill sets needed by him and career and so on and so forth. This is really going to help you. Okay, and what you should do to build your career. That will be our second part. First we'll start with the talk show, and then, a lot of guidance he is going to give you, and you can take it from him if you have any questions, on the guidance on your career. So Budeep has over 15 years of experience in architecting business transformation in the areas of strategy, supply chain operational excellence, and innovation, leveraging advanced technologies. A regular speaker at the industry and supply chain forums, he has authored several articles on supply chain on national as well as international publications, and has multiple intellectual property assets and patents in this area of work for his credit. Wow, I'm impressed. He continues to be close to the academia too, and has sponsored and driven active partnership of Accenture with several B schools over these years. He is an avid student and continues to stay relevant in touch with academics through courses he has completed recently, like CSCP, MITx Supply Chain MicroMaster Program. So welcome, Budeep.
Thank you so much, Ravindra. And my absolute pleasure to talk to you. It's always good.
So very illustrated personality. Thanks, Budeep, for accepting our invitation to share your industry and practice-oriented insights with our listeners.
My pleasure.
Okay, yeah. So let's start with an interesting note on this topic. What has been your top eye-opening moments in your career in supply chain?
Oh, well, you know what? There are quite a few, but there's one that really sticks up there because, it really made me realize that you might talk a lot of supply chain strategy, you might talk a lot of supply chain tech, right? But at the end of the day, it's a people business. And I experienced that before 15 years when I was standing on a barge, trying to talk to a driver of the barge to improve his turnaround time, in a location in a coastal region of India, where people like me were working, but there were 99% of the public that was tourist. I was trying to help him, guide him on what should be the ideal time he should go to, etc. But all he was concerned about was he needs to take a nap, every day, while he's traveling, what time he's going to get his food. And it, you know, it just struck me that there is so much of humane element into supply chain transformation that is beyond all, realms of, all types of things that we speak about. So that was one. And there are a lot more, things I can talk about, but I definitely feel that just struck me. And whatever I've done so far in the last 15 years pivoted me at the end always towards people. So that was one of my really eye-opening moments, Ravindra.
Yeah, I would say that even whenever I have done projects, change management, the most difficult part is people only. It's not the technology, it's not business processes, whatever. People has been always priority A, top A items.
True.
And if you can deal with people, you can deal with supply chain. That's not a problem. I think supply chain is smaller a problem. People are bigger issues.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So, on technology, clearly we all know technology is critical for success and everybody is talking about it. But what is your take on level of disruption we have seen in supply chain last few years?
Yeah, if you just take a couple steps back and we think about it, then, really supply chains can be considered to be a true instantiation of the free markets in which human beings exist, right? The flow of goods, services, finances, etc., right? And I think during COVID in the last few years, I think what all of us have realized is we were all swinging in like two extremes, right? At one point, we were all applauding the efforts of organizations turning around and manufacturing assembly lines overnight to produce a particular line of vaccine, etc. And on the other extreme, we also empty shelves for essential groceries, commodities, and we were cursing the inflexibility and lack of resilience on supply chains, and the companies. Now, to each their own, right? While the industry debated whether supply chain officers and the supply chain organization was like a COVID coward or a COVID cowboy, right? I think the fact of the matter is that at the end of the day, it brought the right focus on supply chain, right? All the meetings that probably were happening in the level 2, level 3 transportation management, logistics department meetings suddenly started to happen in the boardroom. And that completely changed the perspective of what is the value supply chain office, supply chain organization, supply chain officers can bring to drive business outcomes. And you keep that in one hand, and then the unexpected events also started occurring, right? The invasion of Russia, Ukraine, the continued geopolitics, energy disruptions, the way the entire energy setup is changing towards electrification, distributed energy. All of that is having a huge impact on supply chains. So entire investor activism around sustainability, which is going well beyond just just a paper strategy, so to speak. I think that is putting a phenomenal amount of pressure. So the way I summarize it, we all know Newton's third law of motion, right? Every action has got an equal and opposite reaction. I think we've pushed the supply chain spring so hard, right, in the last 2-3 years that literally now the expectations are bouncing back. The organizations are bouncing back in terms of what you expect out of supply chain. On the other hand, the customer, each one of us on the call who is going to listen in later, we are very impatient, right? We are demanding. We are in a fill or a kill world. If you don't give me my product on time when I want it, through the channel I want it, I'm going to kill your brand. And that puts enormous amount of pressure, on supply chain. So all the quick commerces of the world, e-commerces, I think that's, so I think it's a phenomenal, unprecedented disruption we've seen. And I think we all have been familiar with the new lexicon of the new normal. This is what it is going to be.
Yep, I think I remember. I mean, I think all of us will remember during the lockdown, we were sitting at home, turning on our TV, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi was giving the speech about. And in the speech, I think he used the supply chain word. I think I didn't count exactly, but I think 25 times. I think something around that. And everyone realized, I think from a child to a adult, or old person, how
True.
important it was to get the supplies, how important
That's
it
true.
was. And I think everyone, I remember many of the industries, they changed their business process to very, very basic. It was, not forecasting, not planning. I mean, everybody was worried what we are selling, what we need to produce, what material we have. So we went to very basic and it became very important. And I think that CSCM, CSCP, when we talk about the supply chain from mother nature till consumer, became very obvious in COVID time. Very, very obvious because,
I couldn't agree more.
yeah, and the use of technology also became very important. Those who were technology savvy, I think, survived well, actually survive better, so that's what I think. Yeah, so very good discussion. So I want to know how you've seen tech evolve or supply chain over these decades. I think when I started in 1982, I think the supply chain was much different compared to what it is today after 40 years. So how do you see the evolution?
No, I bet it is very different, right? But I genuinely feel that I think the last 70, 80 years, right from the time of up to 50s or from 50s where I think the foundation was set, right from there, right? In terms of mass production, to up to 80s where, the big platform systems of records that most of the organizations have today, right? The ERPs of the world started evolving a lot. Some initial breakthrough models of, let's say, responsiveness in supply chain started coming up. The era of 2000s up to 2020 of late was all about customer, right? Because with the explosion of technology and different channels, suddenly the voice of customer became prime time, customer intimacy, customer, iconic customer experiences. And now I think it is going to be the triple bottom line, as people say, people, planet, profits, green. I think the new normal is going to be about completely changing your P&L, right? And looking at profits, the definition of the word profit very differently. I think the way I always look at it is in the last many decades, right? If you plot these technology S curves, right? A lot of these technology S curves initially were very, they had a very slow rate of progression. But now, in the last 7 to 10 years, these S curves have become a lot more steep in terms of the way they are going towards maturity, and a lot more S curves are coming, right? So the speed of new S curves is extremely fast, and the rate at which they're living their entire life cycle, like 3D printers, for example, right? The way it came in and probably went by, right? The speed at which it is getting, it's kind of even going through its entire life cycle. That's very fast. So, and that's why when we started off, we said that we will never outpace technology.
Yeah, absolutely true. Absolutely true. So, the technology is coming up faster than when you can absorb, that's the challenge.
True.
So my next question is, in your role, you talk to the global supply chain officers as well as CIOs. What is an ideal supply chain in your point of view? Because, you have a much broader perspective being a consulting company
Yeah.
as compared to the user company. So you must be talking to a lot of companies.
No, I think that's a great question. And, there have been many times wherein I've spoken to supply chain officers, the IT supply chain, officers on, indirectly, directly on what is their vision of a good supply chain. It's easy to say that, the entire value. How do you summarize the entire supply chain value proposition in like a line or two? And you actually mentioned it in this call, right now, which is to say that it kind of extends towards mother nature and all far downstream, and a variant of which I kind of picked up in a lot of the reading that I do is the best supply chain in the world is the one that has no beginning and no end. And, if you just think about it, it's exactly what you said. But looking completely upstream, and having end-to-end visibility, and all the way downstream and closing the loop, which is where the circularity and closed loop aspect comes in. That's the ideal definition of what does a good supply chain look like. And I also feel that we are living in the times where traditional supply chains are dead, which means the linearity of supply chains that existed, at least it's dead in the mind, and companies are trying to work to establish the breakage of the linearity and having a network effect. So how do you have all the way from design to sourcing and planning, to manufacturing, to fulfillment, service, reverse. All of this is like a loop instead of something starts after the other. And I think that network effect is something that is another way to look at supply chain. So that's how I would say is a good supply chain for an organization.
I think it's quite complex, and I think we'll keep on evolving. We have not reached to where we want to reach. I mean, we have a lot of ideas, right? But we have to put it on the ground, and that I think it's going to take many years, apart from. But I think we are there somewhere. And what is the role of technology in the priority agenda? So there are a lot of talks about technology, right? So how much is the hype? How much is real? What is going on? What is their role?
Yeah, I think probably this is one of the most important questions of this hour, of this particular chat is, what is the role that technology will play in the agenda of the supply chain organization of the future, right? As you said. I think I'll probably give some context and color to this, and then come to the role of tech. If you historically see, supply chain was always, as I said, a linear function, step of different value chain components, even till date, right? There are so many organizations wherein, let's say, a procurement function is quote unquote not within a supply chain function. It is still even organizationally outside. And it and I'm talking about some of the Fortune 500 companies of the world, right? And that's where you feel that there is so much more of road that needs to cover, when you talk about breaking silos, the network effect. And it's not a straight line manufacturing cost equation, or a cost equation which says reduce procurement costs, reduce design costs, reduce planning costs. It's not about cost alone, which I think, given the GIT model and the efficiencies and the economies of scale philosophy that we were all working towards, I think now supply chain has an opportunity to evolve from that mindset of just being a cost-focused organization into huge value additive organization. So the way I look at it is, the entire mission of supply chain, we have an enlarged mission in supply chain today. It is, I can think of it as a balanced priority set of 5 things. One is, the future ready supply chains of the, need to be resilient. So resilience as a theme, how to focus on creating 360-degree value to the business, by planning for run the operations normally as well as in a disaster scenario. So building resilience has become so critical. That is one thing. The second theme I feel is velocity and responsiveness. There is a certain expectation of a end customer, your immediate customer, let's say as a supply chain function, my business teams, right, as an organization, that I need to operate at a certain velocity and a certain responsiveness. And if I don't meet that, then obviously I'm not doing justice to my business requirements or my customer requirements. So the second priority, in addition to resilience, is responsiveness and real time, right? The third is definitely cost. It is not going anywhere, right? The cost, at the end of the day, with the cyclicity of businesses, cost takeout, cost optimization focus, so that you free up your funds to do something more value additive, right? That will continue to remain. That's number 3. Number 4 as a priority set in this balance is sustainability. If an organization is not focusing in their supply chain on how much carbon footprint impact they are doing in terms of reduction, or monitoring the the transportation from the point of view of, let's say, carbon emissions, controlling water emissions or electricity management in their plants, they are actually doing disservice to their own organization, because sooner or later, even from a compliance standpoint, they will be forced to do that. My hypothesis is there will be geographies and sub-geographies in the world which will make it mandatory, to have certain common minimum expectations on sustainability. And then it's almost like what happened to banking and, the world of financial services in around 2008 collapse, right? The entire compliance angle that came in, SOX as a theme of compliance came in, and there was so much of process change, infra change that had to be enabled in the financial services. Something similar will happen if organizations don't adopt it naturally. So I think that's number 4. And number 5 is, again, it goes to the first question you asked. It's about people, right? The talent, the way of working will definitely be having an impact. Is it enough for the audience to be an MBA in operations or MBA in supply chain anymore? Question mark. Is it enough to just have a degree and probably just jump into the industry and learn on the ground? Question mark. What are the skills of the future? So we'll probably talk a little bit more about that as well. But these are the 5, like a balanced set of priorities that will drive. And the role of tech, think about it. Nothing of this can be realized without technology. Can I aim of becoming resilient without technology? I mean, for resilience, I definitely need visibility. To need visibility, I need to see across my physical node setup. And to do that, I definitely need digital media. I need to create a digital twin. I need to see the virtual node network. It's all technology. Let's take example of sustainability. Can we imagine being sustainable without technology? I mean, the first step is compliance. Compliance is equal to reporting. For reporting, you need the visibility, the power of IoT devices to give you that visibility. So technology is foundationally ingrained in each of these priorities. In fact, talk about cloud, right? If an organization is still on premise and is not cloud enabled, it's not about cost on cloud, right? It's about the advantage. It's about the innovation that you can drive because of the agility you get by being on cloud. That's where, again, it talks to resilience. So I think all of these are underpinned foundationally by technology. Ravindra.
Yeah, good point. Thank you so much. I think you brought very good points. One is about resilience. I think we clearly see that during COVID time, I think organizations become very aware about risk and resilience. And in fact, our certification program also, in the registrations and enrollment increased after COVID-19. So that we have seen. And sustainability definitely is a very latest topic, new topic. So I think a couple of years back, my impression was that people only talk, they don't do anything about it. Okay. But now people are very serious about sustainability. I can see that, organizations are very serious about sustainability. I think in Apex's body of knowledge, we include sustainability many, many years back. But, yet to see the application. But nowadays, that is very caught up like anything. So great points. Thank you so much. So this is very good question that I'm going to ask. Some is hype and some is real, and people don't know what is hype and what is real and what is going on. So how bullish you are on the technology and what are the pitfalls?
Yeah. Okay. Now that's indeed is a good question. Yeah. Look, the promise of technology is always complemented by human ingenuity. Is what we also position in Accenture. It's the power of tech along with human ingenuity, right? Let's talk it in through some examples. Let's talk about, let's say, the architecture of clients. If you open up, under the hood of the car where the engine is. So if you open up the IT landscape of a client from a supply chain standpoint, guess what? A lot of our clients are still on spreadsheets. And it's just the nature of business, right? It's so intricate. If you have a global supply chain, you are federated, you are centralized, you're decentralized, you have plants, IT systems, OT systems. There are industries and organizations where you use different applications for demand, for forecasting. You have different applications for supply, and it's a very nice scenery, a colorful scenery of applications. Let's put it that way, right? In fact, some survey that Accenture did, we realized that on an average there are more than 1,000 applications used across an organization, and around 68% of the officers, CXOs that we interviewed said that they are only expecting their application size to increase. It's already increased in the last 2 years, and it will further increase in the next 2 years. And that just makes you think about what will happen. Here you are trying to talk good, great things about resilience, and everything. And at the end of the day, under the hood of the car, you have a very complicated set of applications that need to make it happen. Obviously, there's a big challenge and a pitfall of interoperability. Gone are the days wherein, as a company, I would have said, what, I'll stick to one vendor. Easy. Wall to wall, I'll go with one vendor. Because today, technology provides those options of specific expertise of products that will deliver specific business capability. So definitely you should leverage it. But then how do you manage interoperability? Right? So up until now, the industry has managed by adopting that wall-to-wall approach. But now that degree of freedom has to be enabled, and we are seeing action on how completely they are going to a best of breed kind of a environment, right? And this challenge of interoperability is what we call as the solution to this is be having a composable architecture. We are living in a world wherein we can't be limiting ourselves to a certain set. We need to adopt a partnerial approach, bring in differentiation in our systems, and manage interoperability through composable architecture. And that's a big concept in itself, which is quite path breaking. So that is one. Another pitfall that I see, Ravindra, very honestly, is the mentality of technology being the silver bullet. Oh, come blockchain. Oh, great promise. If we are looking at it, let me make funds. Let me use some of my funds to do a blockchain POC. Wrong approach. Let me make use of funds to do a Gen AI POC. Wrong approach. I think the approach is, what is my business problem? And what is my business use case? Now, can I completely change the way I solve it using some of the technology choices that I have? And I think that's one pitfall. But I think thanks to the macroeconomic environment as well, which has literally made people a lot more accountable with their funds in the last 15-18 months, people are questioning that. So people are questioning why you want to do that. What's the business value of that? And I think that's the that's a very strong momentum in the right direction. In terms of the bright spots, look, every cloud has a silver lining also. Everything is not a pitfall, right? So there are a lot of bright spots in technology. As I said, it's going to play a sheet anchor role to drive all the 5 priorities that I said, right? The talk about driving customer experience, visibility, sustainability, the role of cloud, IoT. I think we know these words, but truly, I think these are bright spots, huge promise. And now, obviously, there is the new kid on the block, which is Gen AI and the large language models that I'm sure some of the audience is also, dabbling around, doing some courses here and there, which is offering tremendous amount of promise, right? So that's how I'll put it. I think the silver bullet mentality and the architecture that needs to be really looked at with a different, fresh set of lenses, Ravindra.
Interesting, very interesting. And you mentioned Gen AI. Okay, I think these are the hot topics nowadays. People talk about it. So, what is your take time on that? Is Gen AI now here? Time for that, or what's your take? And I think everywhere, we're talking about AI, ML, and all kind of things we're talking about. So, how much can be applied, not applied? What is going on? So, I would like to know from you, because You've been, I think, the forefront of technology implementation in a very top organizations in the world. You must be consulting to international clients and domestic both. So how do you see it?
Yeah, and look, when I've seen many conversations in the industry. When I talk to leaders, there is always this Gen AI. There's always an eyebrow raised on, is it just another hype? Is it going to die the natural death and things like that? But you know what I personally feel is, as a concept, Gen AI is amongst the biggest leaps forward in terms of the journey of AI itself. Uh, if you think about it, unlike, let's say, and this is in no way telling that a blockchain is bad or a Gen AI is good, but if you think about it, Gen AI is something that is towards you as a consumer. You can use Gen AI yourself as a citizen developer. Right? I don't, and probably you cannot use a blockchain before you because it is so easy. And whatever is easy, probably you'll agree, Ravindra, the change management, the adoption is very easy. So at a business level, the ease that you get, by querying a tool, yeah, you might still not understand what's happening in the background, and which we'll come to. But there is a phenomenal amount of B2C element in Gen AI, which is very differentiated compared to other technologies. That's number one. I feel it's also a mix of them. So you asked me whether it is right here now or it is still time for Gen AI to pick up and things like that. I feel it is a little bit of a uh, um, uh, mixed thing that I see in industries and geographies or clients which are very mature. They are almost doing Gen AI. As Accenture, we are doing so many POCs and pilots on Gen AI. But in other geographies, some other geographies where the industry maturity of functions is relatively not advanced, obviously that is not the right thing to do, because at the end of the day, it is the next step change in AI. For AI, you need data, and unless you fix the data, which is spread across the landscape, you're not going to realize value. So I might do a very nice looking POC on Gen AI, but if I don't fix my data at the bottom, it's not going to make any change. So it's a little bit of that I see, but I must admit that I am very bullish on this technology because see, for every and I spoke about the technology S curves, right? So this S curve is just starting off. But if you see the slope of this S curve, it's literally 90 degrees, right? The rate at which we are seeing the hype build up and now probably moving into the next phase. Now, is it going to flatten out? Is it going to still continue? We'll see. Uh, but why is that? The reason is there are a lot of things that are working in favor. Now, up until now, whenever a new technology has gotten in, so to speak, first the POC happens, the pilot happens, the world sees the hype, appreciates the hype, and then slowly, the hardware and the infrastructure that needs to come around it to scale it happens. So it's like a little bit of a sequence. But what I'm seeing in Gen AI is it is all happening in parallel. So the hype is getting generated. At the same time, the ecosystem is exploding with infrastructure. At the end of the day, it's a large language model. So the infrastructure and paraphernalia that needs to surround Gen AI and support it to scale, that all is happening in parallel. So it points to a strong, leading signal that definitely there is huge amount of promise. That's also substantiated with the whole amount of work that we are doing with our clients. So I think it's definitely something to look out for. And hopefully when you invite me next time, you'll probably say, Budeep, you were right, or Budeep, you were wrong. So, that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think it's. I'm also very curious how the world is going to shape up, what they're going to do. I'm very curious about that because I think a lot of talk about technology is there, and I see implementation here and there. But it's very, very interesting, very interesting, very exciting. So a lot of exciting times ahead. So now, I mean, I would like to link this to my listeners. We have a lot of listeners who joined today, and we have to give them some value apart from Gyan. So Gyan is one thing. So I need your guidance for them, I mean, you have been also a recruiter, and you also go to B schools and so on. What advice you will give our listener to accelerate their career growth in supply chain management technology field?
No, I think again, I think it's super critical, important question. I wish I could do this, but if I were to just, even with the huge amount of attendees here, if I would have taken a vote of how many of the audience actually was supply chain by choice, or supply chain by accident, right? It would have been a very interesting thing to see.
I think more by accident.
Exactly. And that's where I'm, and I, whenever I talk to newbies, people who are laterally experienced, I always, ask them this question, and more often than not, they've ended up in supply chain, right? And now, which means that there is something not going right structurally. Why is it not a glam profession? Why is it that people are turning into supply chain by accident? And if you start looking at some of these questions, you obviously start going to the grassroots, which is the E schools, the B schools, right? The curriculums. I must admit that in the last few years, the rate at which the curriculum changes are happening are also very rapid, very fast, compared to what happened, let's say a few years back. But I think that's where some of the challenges lie. In certain academics, institutions, I see all the right elements of building a successful supply chain career, like obviously supply chain as a core, MBA operations, supply chain, whatever, right? But then there are integrated, let's say, data analytics courses, data science courses, introduction to AI or course on AI, and there's a whole bunch. It's like a nice 5-star hotel menu that you can choose, that I want to do ABCD. But what is lacking is it is still siloed. It is not integrated to deliver the right supply chain knowledge to the candidate. And I think that will take its own time to kind of evolve. Because I would probably do a data science course in context to supply chain. I probably right now am doing supply chain, data science, and things like that. The second thing that I think is so important from a practicality aspect when working with organizations. A lot of the people who will be listening in, who are listening in right now, either work for industry or for some of the companies, or in the supply chain, or in consulting, whatever, technology. If you think about it, you need to know the industry. What happens, and I've realized this over the years, is if you're not grounded well on the industry concepts, the way in which supply chain works in an auto industry is fundamentally different from energy industry or a high-tech industry. The priorities can be the same, but the way you need to wire your supply chains, the way you need to optimize your supply chains, take the cost out, drive sustainability is very different. And I think that again doesn't happen in the academia or in the educational setup right now, is the nice sound grounding on industry concepts. For AI to make sense, if I want to optimize my transportation costs using AI will be a bunch of 10 algorithms. Now, the art is how do you use your industry knowledge to modulate that algorithm and deliver the right outputs relevant to your industry and company. So the role of tech is managing this art and science together. And I think the educational setup right now doesn't offer that ready-made to a lot of our candidates, and hence, and plus, I think given COVID, it's become a glam role now. So in a way, that portion should be taken care of. I see a lot more people opting for supply chain courses proactively, are very focused on supply chain, but it needs to be coming together as an integrated ecosystem to really make a big difference. And then when we take an audience poll, the answer is very different. It is supply chain by choice.
Yeah, so I think very, very good point. And, we are also trying hard to expand our portfolio to offer the same. I think we have been known for all the supply chain knowledge. And now I think we have launched a new certification on the supply chain analytics in collaboration with the SP Jain Institute, so that we have done. So I think very, very relevant, very relevant. So I would actually ask people to ask a lot of question and, use Bhudeep's knowledge and guidance, So, shall I hand over to Nistush? Nistush, are you there? I think people have asked some
Yes,
questions.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay,
Yes,
so I'll
we
hand
have
over to you, and
questions.
people have some questions. And if you have some questions in your mind, if you're not put in the chat box, please do so. And we'll be happy to answer. Thank you so much.
Yep,
Right, thank you so much.
Ravindra.
So excellent knowledge sharing. And one thing which really made me, smile or laugh, I would say, was, are people here in supply chain by choice or by accident? So I don't think we will have more than, I would say 10% would be a higher number who would say by choice, but more than 90% should be there who would say by accident. So excellent point there. So we'll start taking questions from the audience. The first question is from Mr. Mohammad Asif Imam Khan. So he says, how's India's infrastructure's support for green logistics and sustainable best businesses practices for transportation business to achieve carbon offset? Do we see the electric vehicle setups are ready to support?
Oh, good question. India is quite an interesting geography, by the way. Just on the side note, I remember one of the client way back before a decade though, or even more, wherein I was doing the transportation planning for a rural India kind of a scenario of how much time it'll take, logistics and all of that. And I remember the distance was like 400 kilometers to travel. And I said easily, this is going to be like a day minimum, give and take, but 20 hours because of the infrastructure inavailability in that area. And I remember discussing with a colleague, and he's like, no, it should be done in like 2-3 hours. And I'm like, that's India, right? And you need to know the local nuances of how do you plan a supply chain setup, because India operates very differently from how you can run down those 300-400 miles in the US or wherever, right? But coming to your question, I think all of us are reading, right? In the last 2-3 years, the way in which you see the policy setup getting completely referred, the completely rechannelized, the amount of investments in logistics setups, the infrastructure that is happening around you, the type of SEZs and the industrial park setups that are being done. I think the one thing that I really personally liked is this entire ONDC setup that is happening, Open Network Digital Commerce. I think it's a fundamental breakthrough in the industry. I think it's going to change the way buyers and sellers meet each other. I could open up a shop and be as powerful as anybody else. And it is such a brilliant initiative by the government, right? So I personally feel the investment would, if you just probably look at the data, I'm sure the investment in the last 3-4 years on green transportation, logistics have probably tripled, if not more, compared to what would have happened before 5 years of that. And it is probably going to be as much because I think the way I'm looking at the entire Make in India, the way in which investments are being brought in, the way in which they need to jointly, manufacture, etc. in India. I think clearly with these frameworks, breakthrough frameworks like ONDC, we are extremely well poised in the next 4-5 years to drive step change in the way we used to do work in India. Mohammed, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So the next question is from Mr. Manoj Purandare. You have rightly said that the importance of SCM has to be increased. Then how do we come across with sales departments, HR mentality, and explain them about the importance of supply chain? So right after that, he did comment that he does not feel this is the right forum for this question, but what I feel is this is absolutely the right question for this forum.
No, great. I somehow get a feeling, Manoj, is it a salary issue you're facing? I don't know which company or industry you're from, but if you're no, but on a serious note, I think that's again a problem, right? Or the pitfall, not at a technology level, but generally, all of these functions, if you see, in a lot of the organizations are often siloed. Supply chain doesn't talk to finance, finance doesn't talk to customer. I hope they all talk to HR because everybody needs to get paid on time. But generally, there is always this siloed and often conflicting priorities. When Ravindra teaches CSCP, he says, the first line he says is supply chain is all about trade-offs. And, if you think about it, if I want to do let's say if you take two functions, supply chain and customer, if I want to drive a promotion in the store, but I'm not telling my demand planner about it, I might want to improve my customer footfall, but then I'm probably not going to have those things anyways on the shelf. And a lot of the time, this bridge is broken, which again points to the fact of how do you build visibility, and hence constructs like control towers, are so much in right now in terms of breaking that. But to your, I know I'm giving you an answer which is around your question. If I knew a little more about your question, I could have been more specific. But I do feel that there are enough and more technology opportunities to connect between functions now. Organizations realize the value. Supply chain, or for that matter, any other function has to be interconnected. And it is just not enough to have a digital core ERP setup. You need to have the right ecosystem integrated as one architecture, and make it seamless as well. Nitish?
Sorry, excellent reply there. So we'll move to the next question, which is from Mr. Kabir Radhakrishnani. From a sustainable, so before the question, he's also had a comment for you, Mr. Budhi, which was such great clarity of thoughts, very well articulated. That was for the last interaction on the question with Mr. Ravindra. So his question is, from a sustainability point of view, do you see something like plastic tax coming in India? I believe it is implemented in UK, Spain, and Italy. However, other countries are not pushing it. In addition, would organization sustainability report scope 1, 2, 3 also have to be audited like financial reports going forward?
Excellent question. First of all, I should thank you for complimenting, and I think it's a great question. Look, if you talk about sustainability, number one, it is not just carbon, right? So there is a whole aspect of net zero, right? Net zero means you need to be like reconciled zero, right? Circularity, trust, traceability, all of that is packed together when you talk sustainability. So it's a combination and not just decarbonization. And I see the clients are going towards 2-3 things. One, how do they achieve their net zero, net positive? And you pick up any Fortune 500 company, and they have an ambition of achieving net zero by so and so year, or completely net positive by so and so year. And look, these are big organizations of the world making a tall claim. Obviously, they need to have the strategy to reach that claim. And guess what? Sustainability is costly. Being sustainable is costly because you need to invest in capex. You need to invest in decarbonization at a plant level, and it is obviously not cheap, right? So, but they are committed. So achieving net zero or net positive across supply chain is one priority. Second is, how do you secure your trust of your customers, your employees? Because as I said in the start, in one of the questions, investors are asking for it. If you don't show me that you are sustainable, if you don't show me that for example, that the phone that I'm using is not having conflict minerals, and it is not some child in Democratic Republic of Congo 6 years when he or she should be using a pen and paper in the classroom, but instead is digging from a cobalt mining site. Unless you prove that to me, I'm not going to buy this mobile phone, right? And hence, to your question, will organizations be committed to reporting scope 1, 2, 3, improving them? They need to. If they don't, they will be forced to. Because as consumers, we are demanding that nowadays. There is already huge amount of work on building ethical practices. Why? Because the consumers are asking for it. So even if there is no mandate or compliance, the organizations need to do that. So and obviously tech can drive a whole bunch around it, right? Right from just basic compliance of sustainability has to be enabled through tech. The next is visibility into, let's say, scope 1, 2, 3 emissions, setting the foundation for transformation. The next that tech can enable is actual transformation. You use the combinatorial power of IoT, AI, to drive, let's say, newer product designs, logistics. So you spoke about using plastic tags. Will I use it in India or not? Honestly, I don't know the answer, right? But I do know the fact that if we are using something, it needs to be ethically sourced, it needs to be environmentally friendly, and it needs to tie in with the net zero ambitions of the company, right? And set up the circular process so that you have the right dispositions attached to it. So that's how I'll put it. And at the end, it is also about leapfrogging. So technology can really drive different business models on sustainability. Concepts like Gen AI that we just spoke about, I mean, just think about it. There are enormous amounts of use cases that can change the game. I mean, it's a topic in itself. But I think that's the way I look at it. Plastic tags or not, to each, it depends on the overall strategy. I think clearly, as India, and just like every other nation, we've banned single-use plastics long back now, I guess. It's quite of many years now. So I think it's only going to be more sharper in terms of expectations from organizations. Thanks for that question.
Excellent answer. And I think that's quite a deep answer. So I've talked about Gen AI, and we have the next question from Mr. Somesh Kumar. So he says there is a theory that Gen AI is like a new toy that which people are playing, and it will flatten out in years. What are your thoughts?
See, I expected any conversation I do, Ravindra, there is one question on Gen AI. But if you followed some of our chat today, we spoke about technology, a big pitfall, right? Technology being a silver bullet. So if the organizations are considering Gen AI to be this magic tool, which will come in and it will solve the world hunger, right? That's obviously not the way to approach Gen AI. It is extremely important. Well, if you do that, then obviously you're going to flatten. You yourself will feel Gen AI is of no use. But the question is not Gen AI is of no use. The question is you didn't use it for the right reason. So I think the promise of Gen AI needs to be looked at from the promise of the exam question, the business problem that you are trying to solve. Example, think of Gen AI in procurement. Think of a automobile industry, let's say a top organization in auto, which has how many tens and thousands of supplier base, right? Think about the number of components that they need to buy, source, direct procurement and direct procurement. Can Gen AI be their co-pilot? Today, just think of the amount of time they take to, let's say, do the PR, do the PO, the entire PR to PO cycle. If I am a purchase manager or a category manager, if I know, and I need to, let's say, do my buying at the right price, how do I quote the right price? Can Gen AI help me bring all the external, internal factors together and build a right price range for me? It surely can. And with explainability, I think that's another very important trend. As I said, I think the world is moving towards technology also making things explainable. So explain to me why this band of price is the right price that I should negotiate with my vendor, right? And Gen AI can do that because it's a very different way of looking at technology. It's a different technology, the way it's architected, right? The LLM. And here is where we need to be using the power of tools like or technologies like Gen AI to radically think differently, but for the right use cases.
Perfect. Excellent. So I think there's a lot to look forward in terms of technology and what is going to be utilized and what not. So that was the last question from the audience. I'll hand it over to you, Ravindra sir, for your final note.
So before we close that, if anyone wants to ask or unmute their mic and ask question to Budeep, anything, I think we'll wait for a couple of minutes and then I think the whole talk was so interesting and full of energy, I would say, that was wonderful. Thank you so much, Budeep, and thank you for accepting our invitation. Yeah.
Budeep and Ravindra, this is Altaf here. I would like to ask one question, like for a beginner, which is the good book to start reading? Like someone who has just started a career with the supply chain and he wants to read a book, which is the good book for the beginner?
First of all, thanks for asking the question. And I can understand it can get incredibly complex, right? Where to start? You Google out, you'll find 50 courses. Ravindra sir will tell you, these are the courses of KnoWerX, excellent. So, well, and on the books, Ravindra sir is the right person to tell you, but I can give you one book, which is the most important that I do every day. That is the newspaper. Pick up and read the newspaper for half an hour, if not more. There will be elements of supply chain related to the industry in everything that you read. There cannot be a bigger and better book which gives you new stories every day, most relevant of today than a newspaper.
Yeah, Budeep, I will add that, if you want to get into basics, if you started the career, I think we had one book and I found it very interesting and quite complete. We used it book for CPIM called Introduction to Materials Management. So I think you can search through Amazon Introduction to Materials Management. It's a very basic book, very, very basic, but addresses all aspects of supply chain. So maybe you can start with that. So thank you so much, Budeep. I think, so Nistush, can you give vote of thanks and then we can probably close the session today. We are dot on time.
Absolutely, so absolutely right on time and full of energy, as you said. Excellent session, Budeep sir. First of all, thank you so much for taking out time from your schedule and joining us as the guest lecturer for today's episode. It was wonderful having you here, and I'm sure the audience has taken a lot from this session. Thank you, Ravi sir, once again for hosting the session, being a wonderful host. There was a lot of laughter, a lot of real-time things that we learned today. Thank you so much for that. And once again, thank you to the audience for joining in. I hope you liked the episode. This will be available on the KnoWerX YouTube channel as well once after the show. The recorded session will be available to view. Please spread among your colleagues, friends, and help us to grow the SCM Talk Show. The next episode will be on 25th of August. Stay tuned to our social media channels to know the speaker and the topic for that. And once again, thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend ahead.
And thank you so much for this opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.